Good morning. How are you doing today? I am so glad you joined us for our conversations about communication. This morning, we are talking about a very common question that I get as a speech language pathologist, and we have not met yet. My name is Jessica Abawa, and I am the owner and speech language pathologist here at Fluent Children's Therapy, and I am excited to be here with you today. So, a question that we often get asked is, does being tongue-tied cause my child's speech delay? And it can be a little bit of a tricky conversation because whenever I get questions from parents or family members, I try to think back to why might they be asking this question, and is there an underlying question, or kind of what I call the real question, that may be coming underneath. So we will definitely talk about that at the end of our video today. But I just wanted to start out by just giving you some basic facts and information, kind of share with you what the research is showing in terms of how tongue tie and speech delays may or may not be related, and then kind of share with you some stories or kind of my own personal experience having been working in the field for as many years as I have. So we can dive right in. I've just got some notes so I don't forget here. But first of all, what is tongue-tied? What does that mean? What does that look like? Maybe you've heard that phrase before, but haven't really understood what it meant. Maybe a pediatrician has told you that your child is tongue-tied or was tongue-tied at birth. And so what does it all mean? So being tongue-tied, I'm going to show you a little visual of my own mouth here. So what the definition is being tongue-tied is when the frenulum, which is what connects the bottom of your tongue to the bottom of your mouth, so this part right here, when that is fused either partially or fully to the bottom of the mouth, that is kind of the technical definition of what being tongue-tied means. Now we've got kind of people use it in common vernacular everyday speech where they say, I was tongue-tied and I couldn't get the words out. That's a little bit different. It probably stems from some of the more scientific or medical definition of it, but what tongue-tied means is when this part of your tongue, the frenulum, is fused, so it's not as long as it should be, or it's completely fused to the bottom of the mouth. So as you can imagine, when you move your tongue, that frenulum helps you to do that. So you can move your tongue side to side, having a appropriately sized or structured frenulum allows you to do different things with your tongue. So it's no surprise that when you hear that your child is tongue-tied, you might think, how is this going to affect different things of their different parts of their development? And if you already have a child who is diagnosed with speech delays, you might be kind of racking your brain to think about, why is this happening? How could this have happened? What caused it? Oh, maybe it was when he was tongue-tied. Most oftentimes, if a child is tongue-tied, it's identified at birth or soon after. And then parents typically have the decision of whether to get it clipped or snipped or not. So if, like I mentioned, being tongue-tied can affect lots of areas of development, one of them being feeding. So if as a baby, the pediatricians, the doctors notice, the frenulum is either shorter or not as mobile as it should be, maybe we should clip it to make it more mobile so that the baby is able to latch more easily. That's a common reason why identifying tongue-tie at an early age is so important, because of course the baby needs to be able to nurse or feed in order to live and live a healthy life. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I hear from both pediatricians and reading in the literature and talking to different parents about tongue-tied and why getting it clipped was necessary for their child. And then they typically develop as as they should if no other factors come into play. So when we talk about speech, it makes sense that you could think, well, if my child's tongue isn't able to move in all of the ways that it needs to move, maybe that's why he's having a hard time pronouncing the sounds. Or maybe that's why she's not, other people can't understand what she's saying. But when we really look at the literature, that just isn't supported. So there really isn't any conclusive studies that show that being tongue-tied and having speech delays go hand in hand. There's a study, and I'll put a link to an article in the comments section after we post this video, but there is a study that was shown that even the sounds that you would typically use your tongue to make, so when it comes to being tongue-tied, often kids can't stick their tongue out all the way, so like they can't do that, or they can't lift or elevate their tongue, they can't do things like that. So sounds where your tongue is required to do that, such as t, t, d, d, and you really put, if you make that sound yourself, you can feel where your tongue is going. Even sounds like l or l. All of those sounds, this study has shown that kids will learn to compensate and use other parts of their tongue to make those sounds. So even if, say, the tongue tie was not identified at birth, it was not clipped, now the child is maybe 2, 3, or 4, or 5 years old, however old the child is, even if that wasn't the case, this study shows that kids can even make the sounds with different parts of their tongues, and you can experiment with it yourself. You can make it with the middle of your tongue. I even have a client, when we're talking about the structure of the mouth, there are definitely areas that, if not addressed, can severely impact the sounds that a child is able to make. But you'll be surprised at how creative kids can get in learning different ways to use their mouth and what we call the articulators, so the lips, the teeth, the jaw, the cheeks, the tongue, all of the parts of our mouth that create speech sounds. You'd be surprised how creative they can get. I have a client on our caseload right now who is missing his 2 front teeth, and he's been missing it for a while. And so the F sound is typically made with the front of your teeth on your lip, like that. But he has learned a way to compensate for that and use different parts of his mouth to create that same sound. And so he kind of does it backwards, like, which again, it's not what we typically see, but it works for him. And so when you're thinking about tongue-tied, especially if it's an older child who has not been identified as tongue-tied as a baby and who has not had the surgery. I had a client a few years back who was from another country, and they had just moved to America, and it had been a few months, but the child had some pretty severe speech pronunciation deficits, and so he was having a hard time imitating some sounds and words. And so the parents had asked us, as a clinic, do we think that getting the frenulum cut would make a difference? And we had talked about the studies really aren't showing that that's going to make a big difference. The child was 5, so even more so, it's snipping that little part of the tongue as a baby is much different than the surgery required for a 5-year-old. So we had that conversation with the family and kind of shared with them what we knew based on the research and based on what our own experience was with kids who have tongue-tied, have been tongue-tied, and their speech. And the family still decided to pursue the surgery. Well, unfortunately, it took a few weeks for the child to recover and to be able to come back to speech therapy, because it takes a lot of healing and whatnot within the mouth. So unfortunately, the surgery didn't make a difference. The speech sounds that he was having trouble with were still there, and even though his tongue was able to move a little bit more freely, that didn't make such a significant difference where we could point back to say, yes, having that tongue tie surgically addressed was what made the difference for your child's speech sounds. So that's just, a big kind of anecdotal case that I worked on personally, that I remember the surgery not making a difference. And of course, looking at the research, we're not seeing that there is strong evidence to show that being tongue-tied is what leads to a child's speech deficits or speech delays or difficulty pronouncing things. And so kind of what I started with was, when I have this question asked of me, because it comes up a lot, to be quite honest with you, I think about what is maybe the real question, or kind of the underlying reason that parents are asking this. And the only thing the strongest thing that I could come up with is that, of course, as a parent, you love your child and you want to do what is best for your child. And when your child is identified with a speech disorder or an articulation disorder, I can imagine that you would kind of rack your brain to think about, like, what happened? How did this happen? Could I have done anything differently? And your child being tongue-tied is not the sole reason that they have speech deficits. The tricky thing with our field, and it gets frustrating at times being a professional in the field, is that there aren't a whole lot of clear answers as to why speech delays, language delays, communication deficits occur. And that can be really frustrating as a parent. But rest assured is that whatever the cause of the speech disorder, it almost doesn't matter. This may be hard to hear, but it almost doesn't matter what the cause of it was, because as a therapist, we're looking at the symptoms. So what can we do now? What is the child doing now? So looking at the child for where they are now, what speech sounds are they saying? How are they able to move their mouth and their tongue in different ways? Are they able to imitate? All of these things are things that we're looking at now. So whether your child was tongue-tied or not, whether it was clipped or not, it doesn't really matter so much, because we're looking at the child now and working on the symptoms now. So therapy wouldn't look any different, whatever the cause of the speech delay. Now, just a small caveat, there are children out there who have very severe tongue ties. So if your tongue is completely fused to the bottom of your mouth, that's a different story. And that's really not what I'm talking about right today. Because obviously there are surgical things that can help to remedy just any sort of movement for that. So those more severe extreme cases aren't what I'm looking at. The more common question is, my child was tongue-tied as a child, as a baby, they got it clipped. Could that be the reason for my child's speech delay? And what the research is showing, and what my professional experience is leading me to believe, is that no, that is not the case, especially if it's already been clipped as a young child. So keep that in mind. Rest assured that I, as a professional, know that you are just looking to do the best for your child, and you are looking for answers and reasons, and it can be hard not to have those, but know that whatever the cause of your child's speech delay, you are doing a great job getting the help and the support you need, and that we are looking at the symptoms and treating those right now and moving forward. So having the sole cause or the reason to understand why isn't really relevant for what we're doing now, unless there are some other things going on. But today we're just talking about being tongue-tied. So hope that was helpful. Like I said, I get this question a lot. I just had it this week. I've probably have it at least, once a week, twice a week, depending on how many new parents and families are coming in. So you're not alone in asking if that your child being tongue-tied, could that have caused a speech delay? And the answer is no, it's not what it's showing today. So hope that was helpful. I'll drop the link to a helpful article in the bottom so you can read more about it if you're really interested, because some families are, and you can read it up for yourself. But I will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Take care.